All right, let's get right into it. A little while back, the former chief economist of the World Bank, Kaushik Basu, looked at a recent economic milestone and described it using just one word: shocking. And today? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into the exact math behind what he was talking about. We're looking at a massive, literally history-making economic reversal between two South Asian neighbors, and how one of them used a surprisingly simple formula to completely rewrite its destiny. So here is the central mystery we're unpacking today. We're looking at Bangladesh, a country that's, roughly an eighth the size of India. Back in 1971, right after a devastating war for independence, the nation was quite literally in ruins. We're talking millions of refugees, an absolutely tragic loss of life, and an economy starting from absolute zero. Honestly, global economists at the time openly doubted if the nation could ever stand on its own 2 feet. Yet, here we are, asking how on earth they managed to surpass an economic giant right next door. To put this into perspective, let's jump from that zero baseline in 1971 straight to a recent International Monetary Fund projection for April 2026. The IMF actually projects Bangladesh's per capita GDP to edge out India's in nominal terms, sitting at $291 compared to India's $282. Now, you might look at that and think, okay, that's a pretty small difference. And yeah, India's overall economy is still about 8 times larger. But the fact that a nation with zero oil reserves, no massive IT sector, and recent severe political instability even reached this point, it's staggering. So how did they do it? To understand this, we really need to strip away all the complex economic jargon and just look at the basic math. Per capita GDP is simply your total national income divided by your total population. That is the whole formula. It's the numerator divided by the denominator. Meaning, if you want this final number to go up, you really only have 2 levers you can pull. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what Bangladesh did. Their strategy, which was partly intentional, partly organic, was to aggressively expand their national income, the numerator, while simultaneously shrinking their population growth, the denominator. Throughout this explainer, we're going to break down both halves of this equation to see exactly how this crazy socioeconomic chain reaction played out in the real world. Section 1. Expanding the numerator, the garment boom. All right, to build up its national income, Bangladesh knew it needed to dominate a specific niche. And what we're looking at is basically a 50-year masterclass in capturing the global garment market. Back in 1974, the Global Multi-Fiber Arrangement, or MFA, put strict quota limits on how many clothes countries could export. A massive South Korean company, Daewoo, had hit its limit. But in 1977, a visionary in Bangladesh realized, hey, our country's quota is completely empty, so he struck a deal. Daewoo got access to Bangladesh's empty quota, and in exchange, Daewoo trained 130 Bangladeshi workers. By 1983, Bangladesh hit the gas on this by creating zero-tax export processing zones. That meant no tax on imported fabric and no tax on exported clothes. It basically made them an unstoppable hub for cheap manufacturing. But then, came 2013 and the horrific Rana Plaza disaster, where a factory collapse killed over 1,000 workers. Honestly, the world thought the industry there was finished. But instead of collapsing, they pivoted hard. Just look at this number, 52. Today, out of the top 100 green-certified, completely sustainable garment factories in the entire world, 52 of them are located in Bangladesh, more than half. They completely transformed their global reputation from dangerous and exploitative to literally leading the world in sustainable garment manufacturing. It is a comeback story that totally secured their economic backbone. And the result of that laser focus? Well, it completely rewired their economy. In 1971, about 60% of their GDP came from agriculture. Today, agriculture is down to just 12%. Meanwhile, industry has surged to 35% and services to 53%. They transitioned a massive portion of their workforce out of the fields and directly into factories and services, creating a really modern multi-sector economy. For some context here, in neighboring India, a much larger portion of the population is still heavily dependent on that agricultural sector. But here is the real secret weapon behind this whole garment boom. The sector employs 44 lakh people. That's 4.4 million workers. And staggeringly, 85% of these workers are women. Factory owners realized super early on that women were incredibly efficient, detail-oriented, and reliable. Bringing millions of women out of their homes and into the formal economy, that was the catalyst that changed absolutely everything. But garments aren't the only thing boosting that numerator. There's also the sheer power of remittances. Right now, roughly 1.25 crore, so 12.5 million, Bangladeshi expats are working globally, everywhere from the Gulf to Europe, and they send back roughly $30 billion every single year. What's super fascinating here is that recently, when political crises caused the informal underground money transfer channels to collapse, expats were basically forced to use official banking channels. This actually resulted in a massive spike in formal remittances, ironically strengthening the official economy right in the middle of a crisis.
Now, let's move out to the rural areas and see how this builds even further. How exactly do you boost income for a village woman who has zero collateral? Well, the answer was the microfinance revolution, championed by the Grameen Bank. By offering small, collateral-free loans to the poor, and again, predominantly to women, millions were able to buy a single sewing machine or, say, start a small dairy. And the repayment rate? A staggering 99%. This created millions of these micro-incomes across the countryside, further swelling that overall national income.
Section 2. Shrinking the denominator. The domino effect. Okay, so we've seen exactly how they exploded the numerator. Now we have to look at how Bangladesh managed to slow down its population growth. The really crucial point here is that this wasn't achieved through strict top-down government population control mandates. It happened completely naturally. It's a socioeconomic chain reaction. Step 1. Women enter the workforce and gain actual financial independence. Because they're working, step 2 happens. The average age of marriage naturally increases. Because these women now have incomes, step 3 follows. They can actually afford school fees, so female school dropout rates fall significantly. And finally, educated, working women naturally plan their families, leading straight to step 4. Fertility rates drop to the replacement level. The contrast here is pretty stark. In Bangladesh, female labor participation has grown to around 36%. Meanwhile, in India, that rate used to be around 30% back in the 1990s, but it has actually fallen to roughly 20% today. Think about that. When you empower half your population to earn, your income goes up and your birth rate stabilizes. It is literally the ultimate hack for increasing per capita GDP. And this laser focus on basic healthcare, education, and really utilizing non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, shows up vividly in the overall social indicators. An average Bangladeshi actually lives longer than an average Indian. Their infant mortality rate, which is the number of children dying within a year of birth, is significantly lower. Even on the 2020 Global Hunger Index, Bangladesh ranked 75th, way ahead of India at 94th. By just focusing on the basics, the everyday quality of life improved right alongside those big economic numbers. Section 3. The reality check. Purchasing power parity. All right, now we need a bit of a reality check. We've been talking a lot about nominal dollars, but honestly, they don't tell the whole story. This brings us to a really vital concept. Purchasing power parity, or PPP. To put it simply, PPP measures how much your money can actually buy locally. For example, if a plate of biryani costs the equivalent of 200 rupees in Mumbai, that exact same plate might only cost 150 rupees in Dhaka, but it could be like 1,500 rupees in New York. So just comparing raw dollar amounts isn't entirely fair because the local cost of living is so radically different. So when we adjust for this local cost and look at actual purchasing power, the picture shifts. Factoring in PPP, India's per capita GDP is actually still 15% ahead of Bangladesh's. So technically, in terms of local buying power, India absolutely maintains the lead. But, and this is a very important caveat, the momentum is rapidly shifting. Back in 2010, Bangladesh's PPP was only 60% of India's. Today, it has rapidly closed the gap to reach 85%. So while India is for sure still ahead in purchasing power, the speed at which Bangladesh is catching up proves they are doing something fundamentally right that absolutely demands our attention. Section 4. Vital lessons moving forward. So what do we actually take away from all this? Well, the actionable lessons are pretty clear. First, dominate a specific manufacturing export niche. You've got to move the workforce from inefficient agriculture into factories and services, whether that's garments, electronics, or pharmaceuticals. Second, you absolutely must integrate women into the formal workforce. You simply cannot leave half your economic engine idling. And third, capitalize on health and education to unlock the demographic dividend, meaning making absolutely sure your massive youth population is actually educated, healthy, and skilled enough to do the work. And that leaves us with this final provocative thought. Right now, both India and Bangladesh have a massive demographic advantage, a huge, high working age population. But here's the thing, this window won't stay open forever. Eventually, these populations are going to age, just like we're seeing in Japan or China. The math is simple, but the execution, that's the hard part. Who will adapt fast enough to fully utilize their people and lead South Asia's economic future before time runs out? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helped you see the numbers in a whole new light.